namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Every day we tell you about wars and conflicts. In West Asia, in Ukraine, in Africa, we talk about tensions building elsewhere. Tonight we'll tell you who is winning all these wars. The Americans. They make up more than 50% of all weapons sales in the world. Their companies rake in the profits and control the outcomes of battles in distant lands. It gives the US immense power. So for all their talk of working for peace, they actually profit from wars. Tonight we'll bring you the latest numbers. In Bangladesh, the unelected government of Mohammad Yunus is accusing India of cultural hegemony, economic harassment and interference. These are their words. India's foreign secretary may go to Dhaka next week, but can he fix ties which Yunus and team seem intent to break? In Nepal, Prime Minister Oli has signed the BRI framework with China should India be worried. Bitcoin has crossed $100,000. What's next? Is it a mainstream asset now? In Syria, Bashar al-Assad has suffered another setback. Rebels have taken the city of Hama. In Iran, the parliament has passed a new chastity law. We'll tell you why the president is reluctant to sign it. In France, the government has fallen. What does it mean for President Macron? Why car maker Nissan says it may not survive. And what does it say about the future of the auto industry? In the Arctic, the ice is melting. We will tell you why this will lead to conflict. And the Pope has got a new car. We'll discuss why it's making news. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Qatar is reportedly back in its role as a mediator for the Gaza war. The move comes as Donald Trump pushes for a ceasefire ahead of his inauguration. Qatar has mediated for months between Israel and Hamas. The talks did not lead to a lasting ceasefire or release of hostages. Top Russian and US Army chiefs speak to each other over a phone call. The rare conversation took place last week. It was held at the request of the Russian side. The two sides discussed ways to avoid further escalation in the Ukraine war. Devendra Fadnavis takes oath as the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. He belongs to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party. The BJP-led alliance swept the assembly elections in a landslide. This is Fadnavis's third stint as the Chief Minister of India's richest state. US chip giant Nvidia continues its South Asia push, signs a new deal to establish an AI center in Vietnam. CEO Jensen Huang meets the country's Prime Minister in Hanoi. Ahead of this, he was in Bangkok, signing deals to develop Thailand's AI infrastructure. And the UK bans daytime TV advertisements for junk food. Ads cannot show fast food, sugary drinks, or even breakfast cereals. These advertisements can only be aired after 9 p.m. The move aims to combat rising child obesity rates in the country. What do the wars in Ukraine and West Asia have in common? The involvement of the United States of America and their military-industrial complex. The Americans are the world's largest exporters of arms. Their weapons do not just sustain conflicts, they also escalate them, and the US profits from it. The American defense industry thrives on global conflicts. It turns chaos into profit. And it has done this again in Ukraine and West Asia. Profits of American defense suppliers have soared. We have the latest data from SIPRI, that's the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. They have analyzed last year's defense deals, and they've confirmed what the world has known all along. Global conflicts boost revenues for the US. Wars help them grow. This is data from 2023. US defense companies dominated the global arms bazaar. They accounted for 50% of all weapons sold worldwide. And what was the value of these contracts? $317 billion. That's the money American companies earned. It's a big number. It's also a warning sign. It points towards a dangerous trend. A new arms race is underway and America is actively enabling it. Why do you think countries buy weapons? To maintain the balance of power, to deter aggressors and to preserve stability. But just look around you. Weapons are not ending conflicts or restoring stability. They are, in fact, intensifying wars. Out of the world's top 100 weapon suppliers, 41 companies are based in the US. These companies accounted for half of all weapon sales last year. The world's top 5 defense manufacturers are American. These are the companies: Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. Together, these 5 companies, these 5 American companies, accounted for 31% of all sales last year across the world. Only 5 American companies. What do these numbers tell you? 2 things. Number 1, just 5 US companies shape global conflicts. And number 2, these companies empower America. They amplify Washington's influence over global wars. And US presidents and governments actively support them. Look at Joe Biden's tenure. Under him, America offered defense deals worth more than $100 billion to its partners. This is facilitated by the government. These deals and contracts helped 4 companies: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and General Dynamics. 58% of the weapons US sold were procured or produced by these 4 companies. 58% of US weapons sold to the world were produced by these 4 companies. So a small group of weapon suppliers holds enormous power. They shape the global arms trade. They also influence the outcome of wars. And the US, that talks about restoring peace at every possible opportunity and forum, actively backs these companies to enable war. This is their business model. More wars, more weapon sales. Last year, global defense sales crossed $600 billion. That's 5% up from 2022. Military budgets are increasing across the board. Last year, they surpassed $2.4 trillion globally. This marks the largest annual increase in more than 1 decade. And once again, the winners were American companies. They're widening their net, finding new customers. Take India, for example, the world's biggest defense importer. For decades, India's top supplier has been Russia, but now Russia is caught in a war. Supplies have taken a hit, so India is set to be turning to American firms. Multiple agreements have been cleared recently. This includes a major drone deal. India is buying 31 long-range American drones. This deal is worth $3 billion. Another one is in the pipeline. This one is to jointly manufacture jet engines. But this project has faced major setbacks. American giant General Electric, or GE, is involved in this one. GE signed up to supply jet engines to India. These engines were supposed to power India's new light combat aircraft, but the deliveries were delayed. They were pushed back to 2025. In the month of October, India was mulling penalties on GE for these delays. And there's a lesson here for countries like India. Relying on a single partner, especially a partner like the US, is risky. Washington has a finger in every pie, and despite its moral grandstanding, its goal is pretty clear. America is looking for business, and that is why it enters wars where it has no business being involved and turns global conflicts into engines of profit. Dhaka is set to host an important guest, the Foreign Secretary of India, Vikram Misri. Reports say he will visit Bangladesh next week, and his trip comes at a very important time. Ties are going downhill. Minorities are under attack in Bangladesh, diplomatic missions are being vandalized, and national flags are being insulted. I know we build up to a lot of trips, but this one is truly make or break. It's a great chance for Dhaka to acknowledge India's concerns to reset this important relationship. Now, we haven't heard from New Delhi yet, but Dhaka has confirmed the trip. Mohammad Yunus's spokesperson says he's looking forward to hosting Vikram Misri. He has also expressed hope that ties would improve.
We are looking forward to the meeting of the visit of the Indian Foreign Secretary. Both the foreign secretaries are going to talk issues of mutual interest, and we hope these meetings are going to help deepen ties between the two neighbors.
The visit is expected to start on December 10th. Chances are the Foreign Secretary will meet his counterpart, and the agenda is expected to be broad. There are visa issues to discuss, security concerns for minorities, border and trade disputes, and of course, the most contentious one, the issue of Sheikh Hasina's stay in New Delhi. If confirmed, this would be the first high-ranking trip to Dhaka. Yunus has been in power since August, but we haven't seen official trips from either side. This would be the first one. So what should we expect? Frankly, don't expect major deals or breakthroughs. Instead, look for small, encouraging signals. Whether it's in joint statements or the temperature of the meetings or even the courtesy extended to the Foreign Secretary of India, it's all about judging the intent from Dhaka. And so far, we have to say it's not been good. On Wednesday, Mohammad Yunus convened an all-party meeting. Well, all parties minus Sheikh Hasina's Awami League. And in this almost all-party meeting, they discussed Dhaka's policy towards India. Look at what the regime spokesperson said afterwards. I'm quoting. The meeting condemned India's attempts to establish cultural hegemony over Bangladesh and its economic harassment of our country. It also condemned India's attempts to interfere in Bangladesh's internal affairs. Cultural hegemony and economic harassment. That's a very strong allegation to make, especially without evidence. And what interference is he talking about? Interference from India. What is he talking about? India never criticized the formation of the interim government, even though it was unconstitutional. Nor did India question the legal attacks on Sheikh Hasina and her allies. India only commented when minorities were attacked. Surely Dhaka must understand that. The problem here is that this regime of Mohammad Yunus is insecure about its position. Hence this obsession with Sheikh Hasina and this fear of Indian meddling. We've heard that from some of Yunus's ministers. One of them said that India must fully acknowledge the takeover in August. Well, news flash, India has. Prime Minister Modi personally congratulated Mohammad Yunus. What more does Dhaka want in terms of acknowledgement? Even at yesterday's all-party meeting, this was an issue. Listen to what one of the leaders said.
We feel that a certain quarter in India, that was the main supporter of the Sheikh Hasina government, is unable to come to terms with the changes that have taken place in Bangladesh.
Again, that's not the case. India has been respectful of Bangladesh's internal politics. But we must say that respect was not mutual, which is when the Indian public opinion turned, when Hindus were attacked by mobs, when temples were vandalized, and when the Indian flag was insulted. Today we saw another incident. A leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party called for a boycott of Indian goods. He also burnt his wife's Indian-made sari. Do you know why? Because of the attack on Dhaka's mission in Tripura. Yes, that attack was wrong, but India has already condemned it. India has also arrested a number of people involved, which is very different from Dhaka's response to India's concerns. And that is why India has started becoming vocal. That is also why Sheikh Hasina has joined in. She was silent for almost 4 months. Then in December, she suddenly found her voice. Last week, Hasina addressed her supporters virtually. She said that there was a plot to kill her family, and she accused Mohammad Yunus of genocide.
Today, I am being accused of genocide. In reality, Yunus has been involved in genocide in a meticulously designed manner. Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, no one has been spared. 11 churches have been razed. Temples and Buddhist shrines have been broken. What is this persecution of minorities for? Why are they being ruthlessly persecuted and attacked?
chances are she had India's support in doing this. It's hard to imagine her speaking out without New Delhi's approval while she's on Indian soil. And frankly, it makes sense. Because there is pressure on the government of India too. Hindu groups are holding massive rallies in India. Opposition parties are asking questions. Trade groups are halting exports. So you cannot ignore the sentiment for too long. The question is, what is the way out? Well, Yunus must realize that India is not his enemy. Yes, Sheikh Hasina's ouster was a setback, but that does not mean that New Delhi is plotting against him. It has concerns as a good neighbor and as a responsible regional power. If Yunus understands that, half the battle is won. But for that, he will have to take off his blinkers. Staying with the region, another Indian ally appears to be straying. I'm talking about Nepal. Their Prime Minister was in China for the last 4 days. You may remember this leader. His name is KP Sharma Oli. Oli took charge in July this year. Most Nepalese prime ministers are expected to visit India after taking office. That has been the practice. But KP Sharma Oli did not get an invite from New Delhi, so he visited China instead. And it's not like he's complaining, because Oli leads a faction of Nepal's Communist Party. He is known to be a pro-China leader. In his last term, he also kicked up a controversy with India. Oli released a map claiming Indian territories as Nepal's. He prefers China over India. We saw further evidence of that this week. Nepal, under Oli, signed the Belt and Road Framework with China, the BRI framework with China. Now, to give you some context, Nepal first joined the BRI in 2017, but the projects never took off, mostly because of debt trap concerns in Kathmandu, also because India opposed it. Oli, though, does not seem to care. He has signed the BRI framework with China. The next step is deciding projects for implementation. In 2017, some 35 projects had been identified for this. By 2019, that number fell to 9 projects. Let's see which projects China and Nepal choose this time. Also, what sort of reaction this move gets, especially within Nepal's government. We say this because Oli leads a coalition government. There are other parties in the alliance that he must take along. His foreign minister, for instance, is from the Nepali Congress, and she visited China last week. And she made one thing very clear. Nepal will only take grants for BRI, not loans. The difference is quite simple. You have to pay back loans. You do not have to pay back grants. Nepal only wants grants, not loans. That's what the foreign minister said. So what does the newly signed framework say? Well, it doesn't say grant or loan. It says aid and technical assistance for projects. Will this terminology satisfy his coalition partners? Well, Oli returned to Kathmandu today, so we'll find out soon enough. For now, let's focus on his stay in China. The Prime Minister met Xi Jinping on Tuesday. Xi promised to expand China's ties with Nepal. Listen in.
总理先生可谓中国人民的老朋友。
China and Nepal are good neighbors, good friends and good partners connected by mountains and rivers. The Chinese side is willing to work with the Nepali side to stay true to the original aspiration of establishing diplomatic relations, consolidate traditional friendship, deepen mutually beneficial cooperation, and promote new and greater development of a China-Nepal strategic cooperative partnership featuring everlasting friendship for development and prosperity.
建交70周年。
Then it was Oli's turn. The Nepalese Prime Minister was all praise. He called Xi Jinping a dynamic and towering leader of our times.
There is no issues, only friendship between Nepal and China. Our cooperative relations are as tall as Himalayas. We are inspired by the astonishing achievements made by China after the founding of the People's Republic of China under the Communist Party of China, especially under your able and visionary leadership. Mr. President, you are a towering and dynamic leader of our time and a true friend of Nepal.
Interesting statements there. Oli says there is no issue between Nepal and China. Well, that is news to us. Because look at this report from 2022. Nepal's official documents accuse China of encroaching into their territory. Not a biggie though, just casual Chinese expansionism. Apparently, it does not qualify as an issue for Prime Minister Oli. He had other engagements lined up too. Yesterday, he was at the Peking University. He also spoke to the Chinese business community in Beijing. He called for stronger commercial ties.
I encourage the business community from both the countries to work together for mutual benefit. Your increased collaboration and partnership will contribute to further enhancing our economic cooperation. I believe the private sector is the real engine of economic growth and prosperity.
So how should India see all of this? With some concern. And there are two parts to Oli's China outreach. The first is the BRI projects. The second is the political alignment. BRI is a long-standing concern for India. China could end up building strategic infrastructure in Nepal like airports, railway lines and digital connectivity, grants or loans. That's a foothold for China. And that too on India's doorsteps. The second part is political alignment. And here there is some respite. There is no multi-partisan support for Nepal's relationship with China. Oli is the main driving force behind it. You just heard him praise the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese president. There's clearly a partisan angle to it, a sort of communist reverence. But Nepal's other political players are different, and India knows this. In August, New Delhi hosted the foreign minister of Nepal. Like I said, she belongs to Nepali Congress, a party that traditionally favors India. Therefore, she got an invite. But her Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, did not. It tells you what India's thinking is. There is enough goodwill for New Delhi in Kathmandu. Plus, this is a country where governments change regularly. So it's all about having patience. As for leverage, India has enough of that too. India makes up 65% of Nepal's total trade. China makes up only 15%. India invested around $700 million in Nepal last year. China invested $250. So the numbers are still stacked in New Delhi's favor. The key is to keep it that way, irrespective of who is in power in Kathmandu.
Bitcoiners, thank you very much. Hello, it's good to be with you.
It was May 22nd, 2010. A Florida man was looking to buy some pizza, specifically 2 large pizzas. So he went on a Bitcoin talk forum and made an offer. 10,000 Bitcoins in exchange for 2 pizzas. A British man took him up on the offer. He delivered the 2 pizzas and he got 10,000 Bitcoins in return. At that point, it did not seem like a lot of money. 10,000 Bitcoins were worth only $41. So it was a fair deal. But today, it would have been a couple of multi-billion-dollar pizzas. Because look at Bitcoin, it has topped $100,000 for the first time ever. Today, 1 Bitcoin is worth $103,000, $103,000. It's a record high for the world's most popular cryptocurrency. And a day many thought would never come. So how did Bitcoin reach here? What fueled this rise? And what does it mean for the future of crypto? Should you buy it? This story begins in 2008, the year of the global financial crisis. Distrust was growing in traditional finance systems. Amid all of this came a 9-page white paper about a payment system called Bitcoin. It was published by an anonymous person going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. The idea was to create a decentralized digital currency. What does that mean? What is a decentralized digital currency? The transaction would happen digitally, directly, from user to user. There will be no middleman. No banks, no governments. The first Bitcoin was launched in the year 2009. It was created by a process called mining. Each Bitcoin is basically a digital file. It is stored in your digital wallet. You can spend it from your wallet. You can even send it to other people. Every single transaction is recorded. It's on a public list called the blockchain. That means you can trace it back. Now, in the beginning, Bitcoin was the realm of tech enthusiasts. One Bitcoin was worth mere cents, so they bought it in bulk, like Britain's James Howells. He had over $700 million in Bitcoin stored on a hard drive, a sum he had accumulated over the years. He could have minted millions, except his partner threw the bag in which this drive was kept. She discarded it in a rubbish dump. Howells tried to get it back, but he could not. His fortune literally went in the dumps. Bitcoin itself had a better trajectory, though. There were some highs in 2021, but then came a drastic slump. 2022 and 2023 were bad years for Bitcoin. In November 2022, one Bitcoin was equal to just $16,000. And that's because of FTX, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. FTX collapsed in 2022. Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, was arrested. He was found guilty of fraud, and that impacted Bitcoin's popularity. But this has been a good year so far, 2024. On the 1st of January this year, Bitcoin was worth $43,000. Today it is worth $103,000. That's a rise of over 130%. Most of it was fueled by just one election. Donald Trump won the White House, and he promised a pro-crypto approach. He has vowed to make the US the crypto capital of the world. Yesterday, Trump made an announcement. Paul Atkins was his pick to lead the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. It is the US market regulator. Atkins will lead it. He is pro-crypto. He does not support regulations for the asset, and that has sent Bitcoin surging. It crossed the $100,000 mark.
If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. It's going to be. It's not going to be made anywhere else. And if Bitcoin is going to the moon, as we say, it's going to the moon, I want America to be the nation that leads the way, and that's what's going to happen.
There were watch parties and celebrations across the globe. And this rally raises a question: is Bitcoin a mainstream asset now? Countries are embracing it like never before. El Salvador has made Bitcoin legal tender. Dubai has created crypto economic zones. Japan has recognized it as legitimate property. So there is excitement. But excitement alone cannot change the rules. Right now, there are two big problems here. Number one is regulation. How do you control something that was designed to be uncontrollable? It's a problem that governments worldwide are facing. Some have banned crypto outright, like China and Saudi Arabia. Others are trying to find a middle path, like a Bitcoin ETF. ETF stands for Exchange Traded Funds. It's like owning a Bitcoin, but through a surrogate. Plus, it is traded on traditional exchanges. So that minimizes the risk.
I think most governments now understand that adoption is happening regardless. It's better to regulate the industry instead of trying to fight against it.
The second problem is volatility. Bitcoin may be $103,000 today, but tomorrow it can crash. It can be back to $10,000 or $12,000. And there's nothing you can do to prevent it. You can say this for any stock. But cryptocurrency is especially volatile. It is heavily influenced by speculative trading and given to sharp price swings, which is never good. And this brings us to the biggest question: should you buy it? Well, if you're in India, do know that crypto is not legal tender here, plus it is taxed 30% on all profits. That is the tax. Also, as things stand today, Bitcoin operates more like the Wild West of finance, full of opportunities, yet also fraught with risks. So the missing piece in this puzzle is global regulation, without which Bitcoin will struggle to become mainstream. Yes, Trump has created a favorable environment, but even as the president of the mighty United States of America, he cannot single-handedly rewrite the rules of global finance. That would require global political will, a coordinated system spanning nations. Until then, Bitcoin's future remains uncertain. Iran is making news for a new law, a controversial chastity law with rules on how to dress up, especially for women. No tight clothing, no showing your skin, and most importantly, proper hijabs. This law has been passed by the Iranian parliament. It needs the president's approval to come into effect. And here's the plot twist. The president is not very keen on it. That's President Masoud Pezeshkian. He took office earlier this year. He campaigned against the strict hijab regulation in Iran. So can he do a complete U-turn and sign this new law? And if he doesn't, will life improve for the women of Iran? Our next report tells you.
Mahsa Amini. It's a name that became a war cry in Iran. In 2022, she died at the hands of Iran's morality police. Her crime? Not wearing a headscarf or hijab. In 2022, Iran's streets were full of protesters. They chanted her name, they called for justice, they clashed with the police. Many called it the Second Iranian Revolution. It's been 2 years since that second revolution, yet nothing in Iran has changed. Today, Iran's parliament has passed a new chastity law. The new rules define improper dressing, and the law lists out the punishment for those who violate it. For women, there should be no exposure below the neck, above the ankles or forearms. They cannot wear tight clothing. Hijabs too must be properly worn. For those who defy these rules, there are harsh punishments. Fines of up to 20 months of the average salary, travel bans, restrictions on internet access, and even imprisonment. Surveillance cameras will now monitor compliance in public spaces. So will the Trade Ministry. It has been tasked with monitoring clothing producers and suppliers. The law has been approved by the Parliament, and it's been approved by the Guardian Council. It must now be signed by the President to come into force. But Iran's President, Masoud Pezeshkian, isn't in favor of it. During his election campaign, he criticized the strict enforcement of hijab regulations. He voiced his opposition to this bill too, but there's not much that he can do. His approval is largely ceremonial, and any further dissent sets him up for a showdown, especially with the country's supreme leader. Which brings us to the story of Iran itself. The hijab was introduced in Iran after the 1979 revolution. Today, it has become a symbol of control, a way to keep women in check. Most Iranians reject mandatory headscarves. A 2020 survey found that 72% of Iranians opposed a compulsory hijab. But that hasn't changed anything. In 2023, an unveiled teen was found unconscious after an alleged altercation with Iran's morality police. She later fell into a coma and died. In November this year, a female student stripped to her underwear outside her university. It was a protest against the country's strict dress code. She was promptly arrested, and there's no news of her after that. These incidents are not just tragedies, they are testaments to a deep and growing disconnect between Iran's rulers and its people. On one side, a regime clinging to its interpretation of morality. On the other, a populace increasingly unwilling to comply. This new chastity law only widens that divide. Each confrontation fuels the fire of dissent. Every arrest adds to the chorus demanding change. The question is, how long can this cycle continue before it reaches a breaking point? The world may watch from the sidelines, carrying headlines or holding vigils for women like Mahsa Amini. But beyond that, they have very little to offer to the women of Iran, for whom this is not just a fight for rights, it's a fight for survival.
Now to Syria, where losses are mounting for Bashar al-Assad. The rebels have captured another city, the city of Hama in central Syria. Assad's forces have retreated from Hama. It's yet another blow for the Syrian president. For almost 8 days now, Assad and his troops have been trying to neutralize a significant threat. The rebels mounted a lightning offensive. They've taken control of multiple cities. It started with Aleppo, which is Syria's second largest city. The rebels seized this city, Aleppo, on the 1st of December, and now Hama has fallen, setting the stage for a bigger offensive. To understand why, look at the map. Look at where Hama is located, right in the middle of Aleppo and Damascus. Damascus is the capital of Syria, and the road to Damascus lies through Hama. That's what makes it strategically crucial. Damascus is a stronghold of Bashar al-Assad. The rebels are eyeing it now. Until recently, an assault on Damascus seemed like a far-fetched idea, but not anymore. The rebels have an upper hand, and their defense supplies have got a boost. Today, they took control of a military base near Hama. The fall of Hama is a serious setback for Assad's regime. He's been at war with rebels for 13 years now. The civil war began in 2011 with an uprising against the Assad regime. It was during the Arab Spring. Hama was one of the cities where the protests began. Back then, these were peaceful protests, but Assad responded with brutal force. 3 years later, in 2014, the ISIS reared its head. A terror group, the Islamic State, wanted to set up a caliphate in the region. Their attacks plunged Syria into deeper chaos. International powers entered the picture. They entered the civil war in Syria. The ISIS was defeated in 2019. But 5 years later, a splinter group of the Al-Qaeda has hit back. They are better organized, better equipped. The group is called the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They are spearheading the offensive against Assad with help from other opposition groups. They have exposed Assad's forces. It appears that Syrian troops are not even putting up a fight. Today, they simply bailed on Hama. The Syrian army announced the withdrawal themselves. Their statement is on your screen. Why did they withdraw from Hama? Apparently, and I'm quoting, to preserve civilian lives and prevent urban combat. It's a bit rich coming from a force that committed unspeakable atrocities on the Syrian people. The fact is, Assad's army is demoralized. Reports say they're now spreading rumors, claiming gains in territories that they have lost, all in a bid to boost the morale of soldiers. Assad is doing his bit too. In the middle of this conflict, the president has announced a salary hike for soldiers, a 50% salary hike. President Assad clearly is on the back foot, but it would be wrong to write him off. He has powerful supporters like Russia. Reports say Moscow is sending reinforcements. It is sending mercenaries to Syria. These are former soldiers of the Wagner Group, Russia's private military force. Wagner was created by Yevgeny Prigozhin in 2014. He was a former confidant of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Prigozhin died last year in a plane crash. This was after he led a mutiny against the Russian state. It was widely speculated that the Kremlin was behind his death. Prigozhin and Putin had a falling out over the war in Ukraine. Russia has denied all these reports, but after Prigozhin's death, Moscow took control of the Wagner soldiers. Some of its mercenaries were absorbed into the Russian forces, and now some of them are being sent to Syria to fight for Assad. Russian planes are already targeting rebels here, and now it will be Russian troops. All of this points to an escalation. The fighting in Syria is set to intensify. Assad is counting on allies like Russia and Iran. But remember, both Russia and Iran are mired in conflicts of their own. So we'll have to wait and see how far they will go to save Assad. In France, the government has fallen. It's a first in 60 years. Prime Minister Michel Barnier is on his way out. And many are asking if President Macron is next. This is, after all, a crisis of his making. It began in June this year. Emmanuel Macron called for a snap election out of the blue. But the result was not what he anticipated. A coalition of left parties came on top. Macron did not give up. He took his time. almost 2 months, and chose a centrist candidate as Prime Minister. That Prime Minister was in office for barely 3 months. This week he has been ousted, and this leaves France without a Prime Minister and a budget. Their economy is struggling. They're set to host 50 world leaders in Paris this weekend, and calls for President Macron to resign are growing louder. Is this the beginning of the end for the French president? Our next report tells you.
On Wednesday, Emmanuel Macron was strolling through the desert. The French president was in Al Ula, marveling at ancient landmarks in Saudi Arabia. It seemed a world away from the domestic crisis looming back at home, because just hours later, Macron was back in Paris, heading directly to the Élysée Palace. The emergency, the fall of his government. It's the first time a French government has been toppled in 60 years. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Michel Barnier was ousted in a no-confidence vote. He had been in office for only 3 months, but the National Assembly has ousted him. The proposal was floated by the left parties, but it was crucially backed by the far right, including Marine Le Pen. 331 lawmakers voted in support of the motion. That's more than the 288 votes needed for it to pass. The disagreement was over an austerity budget that Barnier pushed through without approval. But the turmoil did not begin here. In June, Macron's party lost in the EU Parliament elections. So he called for a snap election. Le Pen's National Rally Party was supposed to win. But in the end, they were kept at bay by the New Popular Front, an uneasy alliance of 4 left-wing parties. They have the numbers in the assembly, but not enough to push their prime ministerial candidate. So Macron chose Michel Barnier as prime minister. That didn't go down well with the left. They have been calling for his ouster from day one, but a new budget gave them the opportunity. Barnier's budget proposed to save 60 billion euros. It was by raising taxes and cutting public spending. It didn't go down well with the left, but surprisingly, the right too agreed. Marine Le Pen called the budget toxic for French people. So they voted him out. Now, Le Pen's argument may have been she didn't like the budget, but she has a bigger ambition here. Oust Barnier first, and then Macron himself. Emmanuel Macron won the presidential election in 2022. His term ends only in 2027. Technically, he doesn't have to resign, but Le Pen seeks to bring him down.
It's up to Emmanuel Macron's conscience to order him if he can sacrifice public action and the fate of France to his pride. It's up to his reason to determine whether he can ignore the evidence of massive popular distrust, which in his case I believe to be definitive.
And right now, she has the support of the French people. Polls show 54% are in favor of Macron resigning. They want an election in 2025. Other opposition lawmakers too want him out. So the calls are growing for him to resign. However, Macron has rejected this idea, saying such a scenario amounted to political fiction. But while a resignation may not be on the cards, Macron has bigger problems ahead. He will need to appoint another prime minister who will have to pass a new budget quickly, or else an economic crisis could engulf France. Right now, France's debt is at 3.2 trillion euros. Its budget deficit is at 6.1%, and it's only rising. French companies are laying off people. Public workers are agitated. The immediate question is, who will Macron choose as the next prime minister? But bigger questions loom. Can France's deeply divided political system overcome its paralysis? And will Macron survive this crisis?
Now let's talk about the Arctic, the northernmost region of the Earth, home to polar bears, seals and walruses. It is a unique habitat and it covers a vast area, about 16 million square kilometers. Every year, the Arctic witnesses a seasonal event. Winter comes and layers of frozen seawater build up. This forms a thick ice cap. It peaks in March. About 3 months later, summer comes and the ice begins to melt. Finally, by September, it is gone. Now, this is a natural process, and it has been this way for thousands of years. But in recent decades, this event has changed dramatically thanks to climate change. It is warming the world, including the Arctic. Its sea ice is declining by more than 12% every decade. That's about 80,000 square kilometers of ice, roughly the same size as Austria or the Czech Republic. That's how much ice the Arctic is losing every decade. So this white wonderland is quickly turning blue. In fact, this ominous milestone is coming sooner than expected. An alarming new report is out. It says that the Arctic will have its first ice-free day in 2027. This is unprecedented. When winter comes, some ice will return, but this pattern wouldn't continue for long. Within the next 2 decades, the Arctic will be completely ice-free, and the world will witness the demise of this frigid pole. Scientists say this is inevitable. So what does it mean for us? An ice-free Arctic, what does it mean? To answer this, let's first understand the climate emergency here. The sun never sets in the Arctic during summer. It is constantly heating the region. But the ice reflects the sunlight into space, and it acts as a great heat shield for the planet. But this ice is depleting. 90% of the old Arctic ice is gone. What we have today, what we have now, is ice that is 5 or more years old, plus new ice is declining every year. In its place, there is more ocean. And ocean does not reflect sunlight, it absorbs, and it creates a vicious spiral of heating. Less ice means more heating and more ice melting. This is speeding up global warming, and it is warming the Arctic even faster, about 4 times faster than the rest of the world. This means more climate disasters, a fragile ecosystem, vanishing habitat, and brewing geopolitical tension. Today, if we were to ask you which regions pose the biggest foreign policy challenges, you may say China or Russia. But believe it or not, soon it will be the Arctic. Look at the 8 Arctic states. They're part of the Arctic Council. They have long collaborated on scientific research. But after the war in Ukraine, their meetings have reduced. Cooperation with Russia has taken a hit. And this has hampered progress on the Arctic emergency. It has turbocharged militarization in the region. Russia represents 53% of the Arctic coastline. All the other Arctic states are part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it's Russia plus NATO here. And all of these countries have Arctic ambitions. As the ice melts, NATO borders are expanding, and Moscow fears encirclement. This could lead to future conflict. So nations are jockeying for political influence here, and economic position as well. That's the other dimension. You see, international waters do not have any jurisdiction. It's like first come, first serve, and everyone wants in. Not only the Arctic nations, even countries like India and China. As the ice melts, new routes are opening up. These new routes are cutting down travel time for ships. They're connecting East Asia to Europe and North America. Plus, this Arctic region is rich in oil, gas, and minerals. So more accessibility will lead to more commercial exploitation. Long story short, a melting Arctic is not one issue. It affects every facet of life. Scientists say we can delay it if we cut carbon emissions dramatically. That is a small window of hope. But let's face it, it is unlikely to happen, because when politicians look through that window, they see more Arctic treasure, more power, more money. They rarely see a planet in crisis. Speaking of crisis, Mercedes-Benz is having a tough time selling its electric cars. Sales plunged 31% in the last quarter, but it seems that divine intervention is already here. Mercedes has just landed a heavy, or should we say, heavenly endorsement from none other than the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Pope Francis has got himself new wheels, and it is an electric Mercedes G-Wagon Pope Mobile with a rotating, elevating, heating seat. but most importantly, zero carbon emissions. This is a first for the Vatican, and it strengthens the pontiff's green credentials, aligning with his stance on climate protection. Our next report tells you more.
The Pope is going viral again. And no, AI-generated puffer jacket images are not involved. This time, it's about going green. Before you picture AI images of a Catholic Shrek, let us clarify. The Lord's most important steward doesn't need artificial intelligence to go viral. What he needed, apparently, was new wheels. The Vatican has unveiled Pope Francis' new Pope Mobile, and in a first, it is all electric. This is an electric Mercedes, a modified version of the German company's G-Class midsize luxury SUV. It will have zero carbon emissions, and the Pope plans to use it during Rome's Jubilee event next year. He will be seen greeting pilgrims from this car, which weighs more than 3 tons, and costs about $150,000. It is an open-top Pope Mobile. It comes in white, which is the traditional papal color. It is decorated with 2 crests with the Pope's symbol. But the highlight of this car is the papal seat. It is elevated, so crowds have a better chance of seeing the Pope. It rotates so the Pope has a better chance of greeting the crowds. And it comes with a heating feature.
The Holy Father's chair can be very easily maneuvered and swiveled. It was a special request from the Vatican, but also every detail, his crest, the platforms in the back that the Swiss Guard can stand on. We even measure the size of their shoes so we know that it fits.
Mercedes is quite proud of their craftsmanship. After all, the carmaker has supplied special vehicles for the Pope for nearly a century.
For us, this is a very special day. It's an honor to be able to present the Holy Father with the new Pope Mobile. It's a tradition that we have had at Mercedes-Benz that spans back almost 100 years now.
This high-profile car delivery is a bright spot. Not just for this relationship, but for Mercedes' reputation as well, which has struggled with a subdued demand for its electric cars, as their sales continue to plummet. This is a win for the Catholic Church as well. The car allows them to burnish their green credentials. The Pope has been vocal about addressing environmental issues. He has 1.5 billion follows. And he has been urging them to think green, by condemning unchecked consumerism or environmental destruction. He has urged rich nations to make drastic changes to tackle climate crisis. He has defended climate protesters, attended climate summits, set off on challenging tours and talked about rising sea levels. Last year, Volkswagen electrified the Vatican's vehicle fleet. And this year, with the electric Mercedes Pope Mobile, the Holy See is going a step forward.
Every one of us should be apologizing today. To whom, you may ask? To that weird guy in your office who asked you to buy Bitcoin. There is no point denying it now. Every office had that one crypto bro, and yes, all of us made fun of him. But he's probably a millionaire today. So congratulations to the weird guy in office. And I'll be honest here, the gloating on the internet is on a different level because Bitcoin bros were mocked and humiliated. A lot of people called it imaginary and monopoly money. The same people are now Googling how to mine cryptocurrency. Some are also Googling, when is the right time to buy Bitcoin? Well, the answer is 10 years ago. I guess sometimes you just have to take it on the chin. So here's a sneak peek into revenge of the Bitcoin bros.
Between you people, don't talk to me that way. You're just a lightweight. Don't talk to me that way.
Everybody wants to know what I would do if I didn't win. I guess we'll never know.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thousands marched demanding South Korean President Yoon's resignation in central Seoul. The Notre Dame Cathedral gears up for its reopening this weekend, 5 years after the fire ravaged the church. And France's famous Magic Lights Festival goes back in time to celebrate its 25th anniversary. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1952, a lethal smog blanketed the city of London. It was called the Great Smog. It lasted for a week, killing about 4,000 people. The smog prompted the country to pass the Clean Air Act. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.